This is Nepal, home to 8 of the world's 10 highest mountains, including Mount Everest. Thousands of rivers cascade down these mountains every year, giving the country one of the largest hydropower potentials in the world. It also lies between India and China, the world's fastest growing major economies on Earth. Despite sitting between two economic giants and possessing enough natural resources to power much of South Asia, Nepal remains one of the poorest countries in the region today. Its economy is smaller than many individual cities across Asia. It imports more than 7 times as much as it exports. Millions of its most productive workers have left the country to find jobs overseas, and the money they send home now keeps the entire economy afloat. For decades, this has created a profound sense of fatalism. Ask many Nepalis why their country has struggled to develop, and you'll often hear the same answer. It doesn't matter who comes to power. Nothing ever changes. Since the restoration of democracy in 1990, Nepal has gone through more than 30 governments. Corruption remains widespread. Infrastructure projects take years to finish. Investment stays low, industries struggle to compete, and young people continue leaving the country in search of better opportunities. The real problem runs much deeper. Nepal isn't trapped by a single bad government or one failed policy. It is trapped inside an economic model that has quietly reinforced its own weaknesses for decades, creating a cycle that becomes harder to escape with every passing year. So, why is Nepal one of the poorest countries in South Asia? And more importantly, can it overcome the structural problems that have held it back for decades? Over the past 3 decades, South Asia has undergone a remarkable economic transformation. India emerged as one of the world's fastest growing major economies, building globally competitive industries in information technology, pharmaceuticals, and manufacturing. Bangladesh transformed itself from one of the poorest countries in Asia into the world's second largest garment exporter, lifting millions of people out of poverty in the process. Even Bhutan, another small, landlocked Himalayan nation, successfully turned its fast-flowing rivers into a major source of export revenue through hydropower. Today, Nepal remains one of the poorest countries in South Asia. Its GDP per capita is well below India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and only slightly ahead of Pakistan. While its neighbors found industries that generated exports, investment, and jobs, Nepal never managed to build a comparable economic engine. So why did Nepal fall behind? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Nepal is landlocked. Nearly 3/4 of the country is covered by rugged mountains. Building roads, railways, and factories is far more expensive than in the flat river plains of India or Bangladesh. But geography alone cannot explain Nepal's economic struggles. After all, Bhutan faces many of the same geographical challenges, yet has achieved a much higher income per person. Switzerland is also mountainous and landlocked, but became one of the richest countries in the world. Geography may create obstacles, but it does not determine destiny. The real difference lies in the kind of economy Nepal built. Today, Nepal is one of the most remittance-dependent economies in the world. Every year, millions of Nepali workers leave for the Gulf countries, Malaysia and South Korea. They work on construction sites, in factories, hotels, and households, sending a portion of their wages back to their families in Nepal. These remittances now account for roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of Nepal's entire economy. For millions of households, these remittances have been life-changing. They have lifted families out of poverty, paid for education, healthcare, and housing, and helped Nepal avoid the kind of financial crises that have devastated many other developing economies. The problem is, most of this money isn't invested in factories, new businesses, or productive industries. Instead, it is spent on daily consumption, imported goods, and real estate. As household incomes rise, demand for cars, electronics, fuel, machinery, and consumer goods rises with it. But because Nepal produces relatively few of these products itself, most of them have to be imported. The result is an economy that consumes far more than it produces. Today, for every rupee Nepal earns from exports, it spends more than 7 rupees on imports. Instead of creating new industries at home, remittances increasingly finance the purchase of goods made somewhere else. The more foreign currency flows into the economy, the harder it becomes for domestic industries to compete. Investment shifts away from manufacturing and agriculture towards construction, real estate, and other non-tradable sectors. Workers continue leaving the country because high-paying industrial jobs never emerge at home. That means even more remittances, even more imports, and even less incentive to build a competitive export sector. If Nepal's economic problems have been obvious for decades, why hasn't any government fixed them? The answer lies in Nepal's politics. Since the restoration of multi-party democracy in 1990, Nepal has experienced more than 30 changes of government. Prime ministers have come and gone. Coalition governments have repeatedly collapsed, and long-term economic planning has often been replaced by short-term political survival. That kind of instability has enormous economic consequences. Building an economy isn't something that happens in a single budget or one election cycle. Major infrastructure projects take years to complete. Industrial reforms require consistent policies. Foreign investors need confidence that the rules won't suddenly change after the next coalition collapses. As a result, foreign direct investment into Nepal remains among the lowest in South Asia, despite the country's strategic location between two of the world's largest economies. It had to build the physical infrastructure needed to create industries, attract investment, and connect itself to global markets. But that proved far more difficult than anyone expected. Unlike many of its neighbors, Nepal begins with a significant geographical disadvantage. It is a landlocked country, surrounded by the Himalayas, with no direct access to the sea. Every container entering or leaving Nepal must pass through another country before reaching an international port. In practice, India serves as Nepal's primary gateway to global trade. The overwhelming majority of Nepal's imports arrive through Indian ports, and most of its exports also transit through Indian territory before reaching overseas markets. That dependence has made Nepal especially vulnerable. Whenever border disruptions, logistical bottlenecks, or diplomatic tensions emerge, Nepal's economy feels the effects almost immediately. The 2015 border blockade exposed just how fragile this dependence could be, triggering severe shortages of fuel, medicine, and other essential goods, while bringing large parts of the economy to a standstill. According to the World Bank, Nepal needs to invest around 10 to 15% of its GDP every year over the next decade just to close its infrastructure gap. Yet capital spending has steadily declined, while projects are routinely delayed by land acquisition disputes, environmental approvals, procurement bottlenecks, and bureaucratic inefficiency. In November 2026, Nepal is scheduled to graduate from the United Nations Least Developed Country category. On paper, this sounds like a remarkable achievement. It reflects decades of progress in education, healthcare, and human development. Graduation signals that Nepal is no longer among the world's very poorest nations. But economically, it could be a serious problem. Unlike Bangladesh or Vietnam, Nepal never developed a large and competitive manufacturing sector. Many of its exporters already struggle with high transportation costs, expensive logistics, imported raw materials, and low productivity. Losing preferential market access could make Nepali products even less competitive in international markets, particularly in industries such as garments, carpets, and textiles. Despite decades of economic stagnation, Nepal is not without opportunities. In fact, some of the country's greatest advantages have barely been tapped. Nepal possesses one of the world's largest untapped hydropower resources. Its rivers have the potential to generate more than 42,000 megawatts of commercially viable electricity. Yet today, only a small fraction of that potential has been developed. India has signed a long-term agreement to purchase up to 10,000 megawatts of Nepali hydropower over the coming decade. Nepal has also begun exporting electricity to Bangladesh through India's transmission network, marking the beginning of a more integrated regional energy market. If these projects continue to expand, Hydropower could become Nepal's largest source of export earnings for decades to come. While international arrivals have largely recovered since the pandemic, average tourist spending remains relatively low. Instead of simply increasing visitor numbers, Nepal has an opportunity to expand luxury trekking, ecotourism, adventure sports, and wellness tourism, industries that generate significantly higher value while placing less pressure on fragile mountain environments. But opportunities alone don't transform economies. They still require one thing Nepal has struggled to maintain for decades: political leadership capable of turning long-term plans into reality. And that is exactly where Nepal's story took an unexpected turn. Nepal still faces enormous challenges. Systemic poverty continues to affect millions of people. Youth unemployment remains stubbornly high, with around 1 in 5 young Nepalis unable to find work. Every year, hundreds of thousands continue leaving the country in search of better opportunities abroad, while millions of families remain dependent on remittances to make ends meet. An entire generation had grown up watching governments rise and fall, political promises come and go, and yet the same structural problems remained. Corruption persisted, infrastructure lagged behind, industries failed to create enough jobs, and the dream of building a successful career increasingly meant leaving Nepal altogether. In September 2025, the country witnessed an unprecedented wave of youth-led protests demanding an end to corruption. What began as public anger quickly evolved into a nationwide movement calling for fundamental change, paving the way for a new generation of political leadership under Prime Minister Balendra Shah. For the first time in decades, many Nepalis began to believe that perhaps the country could finally break free from the cycle that had defined it for so long. But optimism alone is not enough. The real question is whether this political reset can finally deliver the structural reforms Nepal has postponed for decades.